Wow. We were this close to the fourth overall pick in this year's draft. The Jets still ended up with Viggo Björck anyways.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the number one sports podcast network. Thank you for joining us on tonight's episode of Locked On Jets post-draft. What a crazy first several picks it has been. We're recording this before the end of the first round because obviously a lot has already happened, and the Jets did not quite get the exact Hellebuyck deal that they wanted. They were this close, but there came to be a sticking point, and I want to talk about whether it was the right choice to withhold Hellebuyck in this deal or if the Jets missed an opportunity. In the end, they still drafted Viggo Björck at 8th overall, so they come out as objective winners in this whole thing, but now it sets up a very interesting rest of your offseason. Hellebuyck was willing to waive for a team like Buffalo. Is he still going to waive and move to another team, or are the Jets going to try and drag this out as much as possible? Got a lot of theories on that, but we'll dive into all of that in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about the Hellebuyck trade itself. So a number of teams were competing for offers here. Carolina came in with Nikishin and like 32nd overall. We knew that that really wasn't going to be a deal the Jets were interested in. We've also heard that some other teams checked in. Florida was out there. Apparently, they were offering Luosterainen, which would not have been very interesting to the Jets. Winnipeg was basically Lundell or bust, which I would agree with. I think if you're going that route, you have to get Lundell in that deal because, quite frankly, once 9th overall and 25th overall were out of the picture, there wasn't really much else to do. So in this particular situation, you know, the Jets had two bad offers, and Buffalo was really swinging big. The Sabres came in with 4th overall. As a lot of us thought, they were very hot to trot for heli services, and 4th overall was kind of the prized pig pick that they got out of really extorting Chicago for Byram. So, you know, that pick really should have been one that the Jets got, but there was a little bit of a wrinkle. The Sabres were offering 4th overall, a player and a prospect in exchange for Hellebuyck, plus 8th overall. Now, the 8th overall pick potentially being in this package was where the Jets just could not see themselves moving beyond it. They were stuck on this pick. They refused to move it. And ultimately, that's really what broke the deal down. Now, in terms of the roster player that could have come back, I had a couple of thoughts on that. It was either Östlund or maybe like McLeod, you know, one of those guys, plus a prospect or something. Who knows? Could have been, you know, a mediocre B-tier prospect. The Sabres have lots of guys in their system, so, you know, it could have been anyone. There was also that guy Wahlberg that was, I think, traded to another team in an earlier deal that might have been the roster player the Sabres were trying to offer. So the package itself was definitely on the higher end. But the moment that the Sabres asked for 8th overall, which I think a lot of us expected, it was kind of a non-starter for the Jets. Do I think that was the right decision? I have mixed feelings about it because at 4th overall, if you went that route and you moved your 8th overall pick, you would have a guarantee of your pick of the litter, right? Given how the draft order went, Chase Reed went pretty late. Carson Karls went pretty late. Keaton Vierhoff has gone late. Bjork went at 8th overall. So you really could have fortified your blue line with a young player like Reed. Reed is one of the most talented puck movers in the whole draft. A little surprised he went as late as he did. And guess who the Sabres took at 4th overall? Daxon Rudolph. I think that was not a wise choice. So funny enough, I actually think both teams kind of come out of this not as strong as they could have. Hellebuyck for 4th overall would have been a much better return than Rudolph. Daxon's a fine enough top 10, top 15 prospect, but at 4th overall, you really need to be doing better. So I think the Sabres kind of screwed this up too. In terms of the Jets, this gets complicated now, right? You're on Hellebuyck's time. You have about a few months before the season starts, and this process is definitely not over. While I think a lot of us kind of expected him to be moved by the draft, and the Jets were very keenly aware that there's a countdown rolling here. Chevy was maybe playing it a little too strongly. I think he saw that Bjork was going to be available at eighth and kind of gambled here. His gamble paid off, but now you have a bit of a time bomb situation. What do you do with Hellebuyck going forward? And I know a lot of people are thinking he'll start for the Jets at the beginning of this coming season. I'm still not really sure that's going to happen. The way that Shipman kind of fed some information through Dreger, that whole relationship, I think, definitely took a big hit, right? It might be gracious on the public side of things, but behind the scenes, you have to imagine Hellebuyck submitting his trade request and wanting to leave has put a real damper on things. Chevy would not confirm that a trade request was submitted when he was asked about it in his press conference earlier, but let's be real, right? Given the way that he tends to be evasive and tried to answer the questions a little bit sideways, yeah, you can probably guess what Hellebuyck did. So that's something the Jets have taken personally, and we're still going to see big trades. We've seen a lot of them already. We saw Dorofiev heading to the Rangers already. They've cleared out salary. I still don't think Vegas has anywhere near the assets to get it done, but I mean, they are ambitious, and we know that they like this kind of swing and certainly have some bad goalies they need to get rid of. You've got Utah also making a J.J. Peterka trade to the Bruins in exchange for big futures. That's a lot of cap space that they also just cleared that is exactly Hellebuyck sized. Now, do I think the Utah Mammoth are making the Hellebuyck trade? Not right now. I think their focus would probably be a Robertson or a DeBrincat type first, but not to rule it out either. So door A has definitely closed. I'm curious to know if by the end of today, the Sabres try and come back with something else, but I think that door has probably shut. But we were this close to fourth overall, man. That would have been an insane trade. And likely whatever the Sabres were sending back probably would have been pretty decent in terms of prospect returns. Do I think the Jets made a mistake? I don't know yet. This is kind of where I'm a little ambivalent because you still got Bjork. Bjork is a big win at 8th overall, so you can't really discount that. But if you had an opportunity to pick at 4th overall and perhaps get an even higher rated prospect, would that have been the better decision? Only time is going to tell on that one. But I do feel like, there is some real pressure now to sort out this Hellebuyck thing before you get the start of next season. Do I think Hellebuyck would sit out? Probably not. I think he's too professional for that. I think he'd play games until either, the trade materializes or something, prevents him from actively being on the roster. But yeah, bit of a tough one, right? It feels like there was an opportunity here. The Jets were really, really close. Buffalo, I think, came closer than anyone else. Will they return to this deal after the draft is over? Questions still remain. So don't, go away and turn your TV off just yet. I think there's still a lot of drama for this offseason ahead. But amidst all that, the Jets did manage to pick one of my favorite prospects of the whole draft, Viggo Björck. This is a big addition and something where I think the Jets definitely got a win. He was the guy that I was really hoping would fall to the Jets at 8th. That's where a lot of mock drafts had him, but given how NHL teams can sometimes upend those expectations and projections, there was a little bit of a concern that maybe Calgary or another team would get really interested in what he brings. I want to talk about his specific role and what his projection is coming right up in just a moment. If you've got a sweet tooth, you know how tough it is to find the perfect treat without all the sugar. That's why Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy Shots bring that nostalgic flavor back in a brand new way. Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy Shots treat your taste buds to an explosion of fruity sweet flavors with a tasty caffeine kick. It's a quick, easy way to satisfy that sweet craving while keeping things simple and on the go. Obviously, for those of you who like to lift, caffeine can be one of the best easy natural stimulants, but a lot of it is contained in sugary energy drinks, which make you crash afterwards. 5-Hour Energy is always sugar-free, it's convenient, it's portable, on the go, and fits exactly in your gym bag, so it really couldn't be more convenient. And for those of you who just want to fight the 3 p.m. slump at the office, 5-Hour Energy is there for you too. Get candy-flavored chaos with Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy Shots available online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. There are more live events than ever before worth going to see right now. Games, concert, comedy shows, theater shows, festivals, you name it, you've got it. But the hardest part is actually getting tickets. We all know it can be a huge pain in the butt, confusing checkout processes, hidden charges, all that dumb stuff. Nobody likes it. That's why so many fans are turning to Gametime instead. It's the app that's built to make buying tickets as simple as possible. They've got upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and extra special savings opportunities that help you get to your event faster. I've used it to buy Jets tickets when I was visiting Colorado. Got to see the Mile High City and watch Winnipeg beat Colorado on the road. Was a great time, and I got a seat view before I even checked out, and upfront pricing, never hidden charges, no surprise fees. Everything was above board, and I even got shown one of the best value seats in the whole rink. If you want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets just like me, go to Gametime and download the app right now. Create an account and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome back to this post-first selection for the Jets. Obviously, big deal getting Viggo Björck at 8th overall. Tynan Lawrence just got selected by St. Louis at 11th overall. Another guy I think the Jets probably had some interest in, but Björck was definitely the guy that I think a lot of us had really honed in on. So Björck, obviously, for me, is one of the most exciting prospects this draft. He had one of the most meteoric rises of any prospect in the whole class, and there were people who were even talking about potentially looking at a guy that's on par with Stenberg. Now, I think that's a little lofty. Stenberg is obviously a generational level prospect, and based on his scoring rates in the SHL, I think he's definitely a tier above pretty much everyone, barring like McKenna. But Björck is not that far off. He is one of the most creative playmakers, somebody who Djurgården really started to trust more and more. And I think what Björck really offers is just a super unique package, a smaller player, undersized, who's actually super strong on the puck and really hard to get off. And because he's so smart, he's got an extra layer of patience. He's a pretty good skater, a really gifted passer, and he's got a pretty nice shot. He has a really well-balanced offensive tool set married to a really, really high IQ brain that makes him such a unique threat in the NHL. I think, if you think about players who are of his size, you might look at a Marchand or Garland's not the tallest guy either. And Björck doesn't necessarily have some of the more pesty elements of his game, but when you think about guys who are just absolute dogs on the puck and mini pit bulls, I think Björck is exactly that kind of dude. Where he adds an extra layer of intrigue is in the patience and timing. He'll wait opponents out until the perfect pass presents itself, and it's always on tape. Like, he gets it to that opposed or to that friendly stick for an easy tap in. Super smart player. Seems to just understand the moment when it matters most, and he's a really gifted setup guy who also has a nice shot. Björck is definitely one of the draft picks that I think really caught my eye the most, especially on the tape. In many ways, he sort of reminded me of like a shorter Nick Backstrom, who just has this presence of mind to thread pucks through incredibly difficult windows. I think if you're thinking about players he could very much gel with, you need players who have high IQs, and I think Perfetti is the kind of guy that would really benefit from somebody with the sort of skill sets that Björck possesses. He is a beast, and I think he is definitely one of the most talented prospects the Jets have been able to draft in the past 5 to 10 years. Where will he eventually end up on this team? I don't know if I would say 1C, but 2C is definitely a possibility. The concern I would have, though, is that the Jets are going to see his size and try and move him out to the wing. Don't do that, okay? Just don't do that. You don't need to just yet. Until he proves he cannot play center at the NHL level, I think you need to give him a run there. Winnipeg has been desperate for somebody to occupy the space behind Scheifele. See if Björck can do it. The Jets haven't really given too many other opportunities to their internal prospects, so what about the one you just drafted, who's a natural center already in a pro men's league overseas? He's doing it for Djurgården. He's been really good there, and I think this is the time to figure out if he can translate it to the NHL. I don't know quite where his draft pathway is going to be after this round, just because Winnipeg sometimes likes to leave guys overseas for a little bit to marinate. if I were the Jets, I almost would want to bring him to North America a little earlier, especially if the Jets are going to start adjusting how their prospect and development pipeline operates. Having skills development, getting accustomed to North American ice, getting accustomed to the AHL and North American hockey faster and sooner, I think could be something that's really good for the Jets. He's already a pro caliber player and somebody that I think was definitely a guy I could see making the NHL earlier in his career, but of course, Winnipeg has often slow played it. I'm hoping this time that's not the case. This is a new time frame, sort of a new situation, and hopefully a new era for the Jets now that they've got a guy who definitely looks like their future 2C and maybe even an earlier 2C than we thought. So exciting, right? Bjork is one of my favorite prospects. He was the guy that I was just so hoping the Jets would end up getting. I would have been really happy if he'd been taken as high as 4th overall. I would have had zero problems with that. I think he is a top 5 level prospect, just an absolute crackerjack of a pick for the Jets. Really fortunate he fell to Winnipeg, and now we get to reap the benefits. Would the Jets have taken him at 4th overall? I'm not actually sure on that, to be honest. Chase Reed would have been available, and that's certainly a guy that I could have seen going to the Jets in a top 4 pick. But I also know Winnipeg understands they needed a big center. They needed somebody who brings a ton of offensive jump and is that kind of caliber of player down the middle that could really be, an elite playmaker. So, I think Bjork would have been the selection either way, but maybe because they had heard that teams were going to make a run on defensemen first, they felt like they could hold off on that trade and just revisit it post-draft instead, right? The Hellebuyck trade is still very much on the table, and I don't think the draft necessarily is going to change that. I think it gets more complicated, and I'm not sure this is going to be as rapid a process as I was really hoping for. The fact that they got as close as they did does suggest there was definitely urgency from everyone involved to try and see this through. But, the Jets are going to be a hardline team, and we've heard that they're tough to negotiate with. Usually that's put the Jets in one of two positions. Either, a team over offers and they just snatch it up like they've done with Dubois, or Winnipeg kind of gets Brock Nelson again. So hopefully we didn't just get Brock Nelson, because that would be a really tough spot. And if the return ends up being kind of mediocre compared to what the Jets could have gotten with 4th overall and better, that'd be unfortunate. But the Jets got Viggo Björck. That's great. He's definitely a player that I would consider good enough to become a cornerstone for a future franchise. So let's see how the Jets kind of build around him. I think he's got some work to do, and there's some things he's going to want to develop. But in terms of dog kind of picks, dudes who just have that pit bull in them, Viggo is probably as good as it gets when it comes to what the Jets could have had at 8th overall. So very excited. I'd love to see him in camp this coming year. I think he's got a real chance to potentially push for some NHL time out of preseason. We'll see, right? The Jets usually like to slow play things, but I think they've figured out that hasn't really worked as well as they want. And, with the Jets needing to get younger, faster, and more skilled, Bjork could be a player who ends up spending some NHL time sometime either this year or next. Either way, though, yeah, we got our guy. It's time to see where he goes from here, and I'm very hopeful that he'll be the stunning guy we've needed at 2C ever since Brian Little had to retire. In terms of other available guys, Tynan Lawrence going 11th was a little bit surprising in some ways, but it seemed like everyone sort of underrated him because of his early BU stint. I think if the Jets had gone Veerhoff or one of those other defensemen, I would have been okay with it. I think I would have been a little disappointed, though. Bjork is clearly, for me, just a tier above so many of the other prospects and really fills a much bigger need than the Jets have on the back end. We've got more D prospects than we do really higher-end attacking-minded players up front. So for me, I think Winnipeg made the right call here in terms of their draft prioritization. Now it's time to see if they have anything else in store. We know that they were trying to trade up for 4. The sticking point was that it included 8th overall. Maybe they revisit this and try for something else. There are still some players in this draft that they've interviewed and seemingly liked, and that could be an interesting thing either for later in this first round or perhaps into the second round. But we'll just have to keep an eye out and be patient heading into tomorrow's rest of the draft. But Obviously, the offseason priorities are going to shift a little bit here. The Hellebuyck trade not fully getting across the finish line now puts a different kind of deadline for the Jets to sort out, and I want to chat through that in just a brief moment. ED is way more common than most guys think, and millions of men deal with it at some point in their lives. HIMS offers a simple, convenient way to take care of your health by connecting you with licensed healthcare providers online and giving you access to personalized treatment options from the comfort of home. No awkward appointments, no pharmacy lines, just a straightforward process designed making care easier to get. And taking care of yourself shouldn't ever feel complicated. HIMS makes the process private and easy to navigate. It's healthcare built around your schedule and your comfort. A lot of us don't like going to the doctor's office. It can be awkward and uncomfortable, and especially when you've got a personal issue like ED, you can feel like there's judgment even when none is present. HIMS is here to do it at home. It makes the process so much easier. You can speak to licensed medical professionals and get prescriptions. It's safe, convenient, private, and it respects your time. To get simple online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/lockedonnhl. That's hims.com/lockedonnhl for your free online visit. hims.com/lockedonnhl. Prescription required. See website for details and important safety information. Sildenafil is the generic version of Viagra. Viagra is a registered trademark of Viatris Specialty LLC. HIMS is not affiliated with or endorsed by Viatris. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are chatting a little bit about what happens now for the rest of this offseason. Obviously, priorities have slightly shifted. Winnipeg is trying to trade Hellebuyck. I think that has been made very clear. The fact that they almost got the 4th overall pick in a deal really does suggest that the Jets kind of understand the scenario. Friedman really did think that this deal was going to happen sometime today. Dreger, I think, who was from the Sabres camp, really was kind of pushing back on that. So interesting to see the insiders kind of going back and forth here for both teams. But I think the end result is still going to be the same at some point. Hellebuyck has submitted his trade request. You know, Chevy may not officially say it, but he's kind of hinting around that it's happened. And that's where all of this sits. Now, technically, the Jets could sit on this and force him to play another year. I think that risks some real rough outcomes, though, right? Obviously, the Jets got Bjork, but they're going to need more top prospects. And the only way that they're going to really be able to do that is probably by being bad. I don't think Hellebuyck is going to be bad in goal for the Jets this coming season, should that option happen. And I think ultimately, you know, he also doesn't want to sit there and kind of burn another season for a team that doesn't really have a competitive future. That's going to lead to some interesting conversations about other squads out there who are interested in his services. New Jersey has been linked. Utah has been linked. The Sabres, while they did not trade 4th overall, still have a lot of assets, and it does make me wonder at some point if they come back with a different style of offer. You know, the Jets might not really be that into not getting assets from this year's draft. So that could be a bit of an issue in terms of conversations. The draft isn't even over yet. So maybe some team gives the Jets more of the roster sort of players that they're looking for tomorrow or sometime later in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, you know, I think this conversation is now going to get even trickier because, you know, the Jets were probably hoping to get a big top 10 pick added to their pool this year. That has not happened, and they couldn't make it happen without sacrificing what they felt was, you know, a really hefty asset price. And, you know, they're not wrong about that. I do worry, though, that now that teams kind of understand where the situation is, you know, do they shy away and kind of put the Jets in a really tight spot? Carolina is still lurking in this conversation. You know, Nikishin and 32nd overall was a bad first offer, but Tulski's a smart guy. He understands that you're going to start with a low ball offer, especially when the Jets are trying to ask for the sun, the moon, and the stars. Now that Winnipeg didn't quite get any of that, he's going to have some cards in store trying to figure out if he can squeeze something out of whatever Winnipeg is looking to do here. So I think the saga is only going to get more complicated. It's probably going to take some extra time now that it didn't happen at the start of this draft, but I wouldn't go anywhere. I think, you know, now that it didn't happen at this draft, the process is going to be it's going to be complicated. July 1st is coming up, big free agency period. Lots of teams are going to be looking to try and sort out, whether it's the re-signing goalies or maybe acquiring a new one. There's going to be a lot of movement. And I think that's going to make this whole process even more challenging to sort of navigate. But, the Jets held firm. They got their prospect that they wanted. I just don't know how they're going to get the return that they're asking for. There's a time and place for when you can certainly, stand by and stand pat on what you think is a return that's not worth your time. But at some point, that diminishing return problem is going to start to appear. And I worry that that's going to happen with Hellebuyck. The longer that teams can just wait the Jets out, I think the weaker that return is going to be. I don't know if anything is going to be as strong as whatever the Sabres were offering, but it is what it is, right? The team's going to have to pick up and move on. Same for everyone involved. All I can say is good luck, because you have about 2-3 months to sort this out before you start getting into next season, and the countdown towards Hellebuyck's 10-team trade list really starts to get a real attention grabber, and that's not where you want to be. You do not want to have a situation where you are running up against that, especially given what the Jets are going to need. So here we go. Going to be an interesting ride for the rest of the season. We're going to be following all the way through. I'm honestly a little nervous now how this all kind of pans out. I'm very excited about Bjork, but I'm a little nervous about the Hellebuyck situation. That was something that I think the Jets kind of needed to resolve sooner than later. They got close to doing it, but at the last 11th hour sort of backed out and held firm. So now they have a big philosophical question to answer. I don't know how they're going to do it, but if Utah kind of swings in with a big offer, especially with the amount of crazy futures that they have, I wonder if the Jets would be willing to trade within the division. They have done that before when teams have sent them players. They haven't really done that sending a superstar to a rival team. So, gonna be complicated. That's all I can say. But it's funny that, Buffalo ended up taking the guy I did not want the Jets to take in Daxon Rudolph, which at 4th overall, man, it really doesn't feel like it was that great of a use of the pick. But curious to know how you feel about all this. Were you frustrated that the Jets held firm and didn't relent? Do you think the Jets made the right call in not doing so? Who might you have taken at 4th overall had that pick been the Jets? And who would you have wanted from Buffalo if, say, a Helenius was not available? Let me know in the YouTube comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. Tomorrow, next week, we'll report on what the Jets do with the remainder of their selections and if any crazy trades happen somehow over the next couple of days. But like I said, that's all the time that we've got for tonight. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.